Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you share and turn them into pure, actionable insight, helping you get smart fast. Today, we're tackling a contradiction that I think defines so much of modern professional life. I mean, look around. We live in a world that has just mastered speed, convenience, instantaneous everything. We're optimized, we're hyper-connected, and, by every outward metric, we look successful.
And yet, despite all of that external progress, you see generalized anxiety everywhere. Burnout is almost a badge of honor now. You see these high-achieving people who seem to have it all, and they are quietly just battling this deep inner collapse.
Right.
And that points to a really crucial failure point. This idea that rapid external progress without a durable mental strength to back it up is just, it's completely unsustainable.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our source material today is Indestructible Positive Mindset by an engineer, Reuben Juma Onunga. And what stands out to me immediately is that he's not offering some, dose of temporary motivational hype. He's actually approaching the human mind the way he'd approach a civil engineering project.
Exactly. I mean, this deep dive is really confronting the deeper issue, what the author calls the absence of mental governance. He shifts the whole conversation from feeling good to being reliable. His insights come from, careful observation, philosophy, but also an engineer's demand for structural integrity. We're looking for something that's built to bear a sustained load.
So our mission today is to get past the cheerleading and really understand how to construct a mindset that is truly reliable. One that holds steady when pressure mounts, adapts under strain, and stays anchored when all certainty just vanishes. We're trying to understand the architecture that makes you, quote, unbreakable inside.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into the core problem. Why does the standard way we think about positivity fail us so often? When most of us hear be positive, we picture what? Emotional enthusiasm, maybe some forced cheerfulness, trying to ignore the bad stuff?
That is the common misconception, yeah. And that's precisely why it's so fragile. That kind of positivity depends entirely on things going well externally. Good feedback, visible success, constant encouragement.
A sandcastle.
It's exactly like building a beautiful sandcastle right at the tide line. It looks fantastic until that first inevitable wave of pressure or disappointment or just a delay hits. And then what happens? It just collapses into confusion and, honestly, quiet despair.
I think that's a critical distinction the source makes.
Yeah.
Most people treat positivity like a mood they have to desperately maintain,
Right.
not a discipline they practice. And we all know emotions are unstable. They can rise and fall based on your blood sugar, how tired you are, or, the last email you read.
And what's really insightful here is this sobering observation he makes. He says the majority of people don't break because life is impossibly harsh. They break because their minds were never actually trained to carry sustained pressure.
Wow.
If your internal structure is weak, even a pretty small challenge can feel overwhelmingly massive.
Yeah.
It can provoke a whole systemic collapse.
That really reframes the entire discussion. So if fragile positivity is this loud optimism, this denial of struggle, what does Onunga's indestructible positivity actually look like?
It's absolutely not the absence of struggle. It's the ability to remain mentally stable, emotionally governed, and forward-oriented in spite of the difficulty. It's quiet resilience, not loud optimism. To use the engineer's analogy again, traditional positivity is like adding a coat of bright paint. Indestructible positivity is upgrading the structural steel so the building can actually withstand a Category 5 storm. It's all about calm endurance that's rooted in conviction, not in a feeling.
That takes us straight to the battlefield. I mean, the source material centers us immediately on the mind as the primary arena, where success and failure are really determined. You have to get that the battle for stability is internal long before it ever shows up on the outside.
That is the crucial insight. Events themselves don't break people. The interpretation of those events does. Before any external situation actually defeats a person, a financial loss, a setback at work, it has already weakened them mentally.
Ah, okay.
The real enemy isn't the difficulty outside, it's what the author calls mental surrender on the inside.
Which means you need a foundation. And the source champions one above all else. Truth over emotion. We kind of live in this cultural feedback loop where if a feeling is strong, we treat it like it's a fact. But feelings are. They're powerful, yes, but they're terrible guys. They just react to everything.
But truth, on the other hand, remains constant. It's objective. So the disciplined mind has to master what Onunga calls the discipline of separation. It's this deliberate act of putting daylight between the data, what is actually happening, and your reaction, what I'm feeling. Without that clarity, your mind is just tossed around. It cycles between false hope and sudden despair.
Wait a second, I hear that and it sounds a lot like classic Stoicism, which has been around for thousands of years. What does an engineer add to that ancient idea that makes this, indestructible and new for us?
That's a great question because it adds the element of systematic governance. Stoicism is a philosophy of acceptance. Onunga's framework is an engineering blueprint for intervention. He focuses on the practical tools you need to interrupt that emotional surge and restore your own structural integrity. It's about building an internal firewall. For high achievers, this means you have to immediately interrupt those emotional spirals by asking grounded, truth-based questions.
So instead of that chaotic, why me, why is this always happening, which is just emotion talking,
Exactly.
you shift to questions about data and action.
Precisely. You ask, what is actually happening right now? Strip away the fear, strip away the projection. Then what is within my immediate control? And most importantly, what is the next single responsible step I can take? That process, it takes chaos, which is a feeling, and instantly transforms it into mental structure and actionable governance. You replace the panic with a reliable system.
Okay, so once we've anchored ourselves in truth, we have to start governing these dynamic inner systems. We move to the discipline of thought, that inner voice. That internal monologue is, it's arguably the biggest influence on our daily lives. It's constantly interpreting events, shaping who we think we are. And when that voice is left undisciplined, it's almost always negative, distorted, and self-sabotaging.
And governing it has to start with awareness. You can't manage or correct something you don't first observe. Discipline here means actively correcting distortions with truth, not just trying to suppress them. So, for example, you acknowledge the doubt that creeps in, I might fail at this, but you actively refuse to obey that doubt. The source is clear. Unchallenged thoughts create powerful emotional reactions, and those lead, rapidly, to impulsive and often destructive decisions.
Let's connect that to the relentless pressure we all feel. The source says an indestructible mind doesn't deny hardship. It reframes it instantly. How does that reframing actually work in practice?
Well, difficulty isn't proof that you're defeated or that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence of engagement. It's the necessary friction for growth. Think about a structural beam. It's only tested when you put it under a load. The moment of difficulty is actually proof that you're still in the game and that your internal architecture is being trained.
That is the critical agency shift. It's changing that default loop in your head from, why is this happening to me? Which is a victim position, you're ceding all control.
Right, complete victimhood.
What is this developing in me?
Exactly. When you ask, what is this developing in me, you immediately move from pain to purpose. You reclaim responsibility for your reaction, and you transform the suffering into a tool for development.
And this leads us to the core of visible strength, emotional control. The author is adamant that calmness under pressure is not some lucky personality trait you're born with. It's a trained discipline. We're aiming for self-mastery, where emotions are acknowledged, understood, but absolutely not obeyed.
And the key mechanism here is what the source calls the role of the pause. Think of it like installing an intentional safety buffer in your system. Highly resilient people, effective leaders, they learn to intentionally pause, to create space, even a microsecond, between the feeling and the action that follows.
But how do we practice that in the moment? When you get blindsided by a stressful email or a crisis call, that feeling of panic is instantaneous.
It requires pre-commitment. The pause is trained outside the crisis through things like breath work or just mental visualization. But when the stress hits, the pause requires a conscious, repeatable intervention, a mental checkpoint. Instead of reacting, you consciously shift your attention to your feet on the floor or the texture of the chair you're in. You ground your body to halt that emotional hijacking. That gap, that moment of stillness, is where you reclaim governance. And that's a crucial insight because most failures, professional and personal, they aren't strategic. They're just the result of unmanaged emotional impulse.
All right, shifting now to the architecture of long-term sustainability. Willpower is finite, right? It just wears out under prolonged pressure. So what actually sustains endurance over the long haul? This is what it boils down to meaning and something called disciplined hope.
Disciplined hope is vital. It's not just optimism, this idea that you expect quick, easy improvement. If your hope depends on tomorrow being better, you're still fragile. Disciplined hope is a stabilizing anchor that expects meaning and purpose to remain, even if the outcome you want is delayed or maybe shifts entirely.
So faith, in this context, is the anchor that stabilizes who you are during the difficulty. It preserves your direction even when the immediate outcomes are totally unclear. Meaning is what organizes the pain you're going through.
Precisely. If you know the why, you can bear almost anyhow. An engineer designing a system doesn't just rely on the initial burst of energy. They design for reliable energy flow over 20 years. That reliable energy is purpose.
Once that robust inner structure is built, the source moves on to protection, which I find fascinating. It warns about guarding the mind from contamination. The idea that a mindset isn't usually destroyed by one single crisis, it's slowly, subtly eroded by unchecked mental exposure.
And contamination is so insidious because it's usually self-inflicted, and we just dismiss it as just consumption. Think about the subtle but corrosive effects of constant comparison on social media, where everyone's highlight reel becomes proof that your own path is insufficient, or the news cycle that's literally designed to amplify fear and manufactured outrage.
For our audience, these high-achieving people, how does this contamination show up in a high-pressure corporate environment?
Oh, it creates systemic distrust and anxiety. You spend hours observing the curated performance of others, their apparent effortless success, and that noise pollutes your internal perspective on what's even achievable or necessary. You become incapable of distinguishing a genuine priority from performative outrage. Guarding the mind requires intense intentionality, selectivity, limiting exposure to content that drains your energy or distorts reality. It's about restoring clarity by reducing all that unnecessary noise. You need less input, not more.
And all this rigorous discipline leads to the final building block: consistency. We've established that mental strength is revealed in a crisis, but it's built daily, in small, non-dramatic choices.
Right, so positivity isn't some sudden breakthrough you stumble upon. It's the cumulative result of repeated habits, daily choices. And the source makes a profound point that I think a lot of listeners need to hear. Inconsistency weakens your positivity far more than adversity does.
That sounds like a paradox. Why would that be?
Because inconsistency erodes self-trust. Every time you commit to a small discipline like pausing before you react or taking that next responsible step and then you immediately give up, you teach your mind that you can't rely on yourself to maintain the structure. Consistency rebuilds that reliability step by step, which is the definition of true stability.
We've covered everything from separating truth and emotion to the power of consistent self-trust. The culmination of all these disciplines, as Chapter 10 summarizes, is the ability to become mentally unbreakable. And this means remaining functional, clear, and purposeful when difficulty not only arrives, but when it persists and becomes entrenched. It's the ability to absorb systemic shock without losing your internal compass.
And this strength is not just for self-preservation. That's a really important final point. The source emphasizes the implications for everyone else. Those who remain steady and clear under intense pressure become these vital anchors for everyone around them. They stabilize their families, they lead teams through uncertainty, they strengthen whole communities. Stability, it turns out, is genuinely contagious.
So if we synthesize this entire blueprint, indestructible positivity is quiet resilience. It's the repeated, daily, non-dramatic choice of clarity over chaos, discipline over impulse, and meaning over despair. It's architecture built to last.
When the mind is governed, disciplined, and anchored in truth, external circumstances might rattle the building, but they fundamentally cannot destroy the inner foundation. That's the essence of building a truly reliable and sovereign mental life.
That shift from fragile emotion to reliable governance is exactly what we needed to deep dive into. Thank you for guiding us through Onunga's structural approach.
My privilege. And let me just circle back to the author's identity as an engineer. He designs systems for long-term sustainability and not for temporary performance. This whole framework is about building reliable inner architecture that minimizes the chance of systemic failure. A mind that's governed, disciplined, and anchored this way is a reliable foundation.
Makes perfect sense. So here's a final provocative thought for you to consider as you go back into your week. The author states that a reliable mind becomes the foundation upon which progress, leadership, and peace are built. Okay. Considering this necessity for foundational reliability, what daily, small, non-dramatic commitment could you make this week in thought governance, emotional control, or consistent practice to begin building that reliable architecture, knowing that a crisis will only ever reveal the structure you already have, not build it for you, something to chew on? Until next time, keep digging deeper.